Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Happiness Happens. My guest today is just so wonderful and so lovely. Her name is Susan Casey, and we met so serendipitously. She wanted to start a podcast, and she found me on Instagram, and we launched her show, and it evolved so much over the last few years. And she has created this beautiful community around grief and loss and internal well-being and higher consciousness. And it's all the things that we talk about in today's episode. You are going to love Susan just as much as I do. She is just such a light in this world and the work that she is doing. She is an author, she's a podcaster, she's a speaker, she's a creator, and she is all things love. So let's get into our conversation today with Susan. Before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode, and leave us a rating and review where you're listening to the podcast, because I really would love to hear how you're loving our conversations. Okay, let's get into our conversation with Susan. Welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast, Susan. I'm so excited to have you here.
Me too. I'm so excited to be here.
I have been so looking forward to this conversation because you and I have in-depth conversations pretty much all the time for hours on end, and we talk about everything under the sun. So now we get to do that here on my podcast. So this is really, really great.
I am so honored. It is so exciting to finally be a part of this podcast because I adore Happiness Happens.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to start off our interview today with a question that I ask all of my guests. Is the first question that I ask on my show. And it's, what does happiness mean to you?
To put it very simply, I think happiness or joy for me is when I am living my most authentic life. And what that means is that I allow myself the space to feel into the experience that I'm having on a daily basis, whether that's sadness or fear, anything at all that comes up for me. I think that we, as human beings, we're always on the go, and we seldom take the time and space to feel our experience. So that's happiness to me. That's joy, even if it's not a joyful feeling, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think we tend to bypass a lot of those really hard and uncomfortable feelings. And I think that they eventually catch up to us. And would you say that that's why some people can find themselves just so unhappy in life and lost in life and, in a place where they never envisioned that they would be?
100%. I mean, I think that, well, this is a much deeper discussion than probably we have time for in this half an hour episode.
Usually
Um,
is.
but what I will say very simply is that as human beings, we are very hard on ourselves. And so not only do we not leave space for our feelings, when we do have a feeling, we'll then judge it. So, for example, if I'm having a feeling about something and I don't think I should, I will then say, I will do this self talk like, oh, Susan, stop it. That's ridiculous. Why are you upset over something like this? And so we don't even understand that oftentimes we place judgment on top of our feeling. And so we all run around wondering why we're so unhappy. And it is because we don't allow ourselves to be human and love ourselves through our human experience.
That's a really, really interesting point. And I know that I do this all the time. I invalidate my own feelings all the time. And I'm curious because, I introduced you at the beginning of this podcast separately from our interview today. So everyone has an idea of your background, but why is it that we have this deep ability to invalidate our own selves?
I think it goes even deeper than invalidation. I think it's not just invalidating, it's judging it. And so think about this. Now, I don't know your listener base, but in order for people to understand me in the way that I am going to talk, I need you and your listeners to understand that my perspective on life and who we are is not a soul inside of a body, but a body inside our consciousness, our human consciousness. So I always think, and in my work as a therapist, that there are two of us in collaboration, our human self, right? Blood and bone, and then our higher consciousness, our soul, and that we are constantly communicating. But oftentimes we don't hear the guidance of our higher self. Some people call it intuition. So what do I mean by that? As a human being, we are here to experience our life. Our whole life throughout our day, second to second, is one gigantic experience, right? And because we feel things, our feeling that comes from our experience is our higher guidance. Things that feel good, things that don't feel good. And so, because we have that contrast to know what feels good and what doesn't feel good, it allows that the idea of happiness, right, or joy, to follow those things that feel good. And we wouldn't know what feels good if we didn't know what didn't feel good.
Right.
So but what happens, because we know that contrast as human beings, we place judgment on things, that things are good or things are bad. And so because of that, we learn to judge our own feelings that we have within an experience. Does that make sense? Do you
Mm-hmm.
understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you talk about invalidation, that's what I am talking about when we don't even allow ourselves to to feel whatever it is we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Loving ourselves through our human experience is what gives us deep joy. And that, I think, is something that is sorely missing in our world.
I could not agree with you more. I absolutely think that it's a crucial piece. And I think too that we go through life not really aware or conscious of like what is actually, like, we know what's happening around us, but we don't really pay attention to all of the specifics. You know what I mean? And we
We're
get
too in
wrapped
our
up.
head. We live
So
up here.
exactly. We get so wrapped up in the story and the drama of the story. I like to call it the drama of the story, even though, like, I don't mean it in a bad way. It just is. We create this
Yeah.
drama around the story, and it's kind of thinking like, how does that actually serve us? If you're making a decision from that place, you can't have a different outer experience because you're so wrapped up in what it could or should or has to look like, or all these other external stories that people place on to us. And I think that, like you said, like, that piece is missing. And I also think, though, that we don't really have the awareness necessarily around it. And how does someone even begin to find that awareness?
So it's a beautiful question because at least in the Western culture, our lives are very fast. We're always multitasking. And then
Yeah.
add to that our devices,
Mm-hmm.
right, that distract us even more. Because in our busyness, being up here, we are cut off from our higher consciousness, our higher guidance, right? So we feel very alone. We feel frustrated. We feel all of that despair. What's the purpose anyway? So how do we connect? We connect by understanding that we have a higher consciousness, that we have a higher guidance that is always communicating to us, and it's cultivating that relationship. People do that in lots of different ways. We always hear meditation. The whole point of meditation is to quiet the mind because we get so caught up in the chatter of what's happening in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And our higher consciousness, it's energetic. It's because we get the feeling with the experience, right? It's a feeling. And in order to feel the feelings, you need to have space to feel it. And so people do that in lots of different ways. If meditation doesn't work for people, I always say start out with 3 minutes a day, and you'll see just how long 3 minutes is and how busy our mind is when you just try to be quiet for 3 minutes a day. But if that doesn't work for you, take the space to take a walk,
Mm-hmm.
just connect, listen to the birds. When we talk about staying in the moment, what that really means is, again, being in our body, feeling what we're feeling with the experience we're having.
Right.
Be intentional. Take a walk and listen to the birds. Smell the smells. What does it smell like to be outside? I know this sounds silly, but think about it. We can be outside listening, plugged into a podcast, listening to our music. We're up in our mind. We're thinking about the day. We get really irritated with a memory that we have about, a colleague, and we are anywhere but in the moment connecting to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and cultivating that relationship. So if people want that deeper connection to self, then you got to make the space for it. And first
Mm-hmm.
is by awareness that it exists.
That's so beautiful. And
Unplug.
no, it's true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I think too, one thing that I hear often is, I'm just so busy though. Like I don't really have the time. Like I don't really have, I don't this, I don't that. But I kind of related a little bit to, because I tell myself this story all the time about creating content, like creating content for my both of my brands and my company. And this, I'm like, I don't have time. I don't have time. But how much time do you actually sit and consume other things and other pieces of content? If you have the time to sit and consume, then you have this time to sit and create. So it's like, if you have the time to do all of these different things, you know, more than likely, like you're going to go to bed at the end of the day every single day, right? You're going to climb into bed and you're going to be tired and you're going to do all the things. Why not close your eyes? It just takes 3 minutes instead of whatever else other thing you were going to do.
Well, okay, so I get two things. I love that you talked about creator. I want to spend some time talking about that. But first, when people tell me they don't have the time, I want people to start paying attention to how much time and energy they consume by replaying the same stories in their head over and over and over and over and over again. That takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy because we literally can replay our thoughts. They pay attention. How many times do you recircle that same conversation you had with a colleague that irritated you, or your mother-in-law, or your brother, or whoever it is in your life, right? We go over it and over it and over it, which brings me to my next point about creation. As human beings, we are always creating. And I think this is another misnomer that I want to take a minute to explain. As human beings, we are so powerful. We're sovereign beings, right? We're these spiritual beings having a human experience. And as creators, we have a thought, a desire, right? Let's talk about you, Simona. You had a desire one day to create a podcast company, right? That was a desire that you had. As soon as we have a desire, it lives out there in the future for us. We hear about manifestation. I think that there's a ton of misinformation around what it means to manifest. Manifestation, we operate at a vibrational level. All of us do. And as we increase our vibration, going back to joy, being joyful, that increases our vibration than if we're really sad and depressed. Okay. So, as creators, we have a thought, a desire. You have a desire to create a podcast. And so that desire goes out into the world. And then you have thoughts about that. How are you going to create that? What are you going to do? And eventually, that desire and all of those thoughts that go into this creation that you want, your podcast, eventually turns into a physical manifestation. You now have Costantini Productions.
Mm.
Okay. However, just because you desired it didn't mean it was going to come to fruition. You had to hold that desire. You had to take, inspired action steps around creating that, creating your podcast production company, etc. So we're always creating, always. And sometimes we create from our thoughts that are attached to a belief and things show up in our life.
Mm.
If you want to know how you're feeling about your life, take a look around. Everything that happens to us happens for us. We are never a victim. We actually are the creators of every single thing that shows up in our life. And everything that shows up in our life is a vibrational match to where we are in our life and the way that we think. I know that this is much more involved than we have time to go into, but I want people to understand you draw everything into your life as a mirror. The things that you think are good and the things that you think are bad, everything that comes to us is for us and to help us heal. So if you
Mm.
get a trigger, if somebody triggers you, take a step back. What is it bringing up in you?
I like
Um,
that you added that last part. And I want to ask you a question about this really quick, because I think that, someone could be listening to this right now and be like, okay, but I experienced a really traumatic event, or like something that was really terrible, or, something that was really painful, something that was abusive, like anything like that on that scale. And they would say, well, I didn't ask for that. I didn't want that. But would you argue that that's like your soul's journey to healing, brought it into your awareness?
Sure. And also people have to remember that this is not your first rodeo,
Right.
right? I mean, if you've got listeners that don't believe in that, then they can just click off the station and not.
Well, we're all here in the same thing together because we all have the same beliefs over here. So
Yeah.
we all
So
skew the same way.
we've lived multiple lifetimes. And so people will often say to me, well, Susan, how can you say this? What about a child that comes and has cancer? They didn't do anything, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're sovereign beings. We have multiple lifetimes. We bring in stuff. We have ancestral lines. We have many different things that we bring into each lifetime.
Mm,
And when we bring those things in, it is always an opportunity for us to learn and expand in consciousness and an expand in love, because we are creators. We're always contributing to the expansion. The universe doesn't care if we expand through negative experiences or positive experiences. The universe just cares about expanding.
mm,
We as sovereign beings choose the way we want to expand. So if something shows up in our life, it is there to help us heal. And I know it is difficult. I could sit here and people could have arguments all day long. Once we actually take full accountability to understand the powerful beings that we are,
mm.
then our emotions don't control our life. We become the master, where we understand the feelings that we have are an opportunity for us to heal whatever needs healing.
If
And
you
it
choose to look at it that way, though, because not everyone even has the awareness enough to be able to look at it that way.
Correct. Exactly. And that's why I feel like we're condensing this in a very short period of time. But there is a lot of I'll tell you, somebody who I really love for people interested is Athena in Truth. And
Mm,
the channel is Robin, but she's got a beautiful little podcast, and they're little 3, 4, 5 minute teachings on exactly the stuff that I'm talking about right now. But I think that if we each understood just how powerful we are, and that we really are here to have a joyful life. Of course, we're going to experience sadness. We have to, because we have to know the contrast.
yeah.
And that we're going to experience deep grief with loss. Again, going back to what I said, it's allowing yourself to feel the emotion that comes up through our experiences, whether it's sadness, whether it's fear, whether it's joy, so that we understand and we can also lean into the things that bring us more joy. And
Mm,
that also changes our vibration. I am not talking about toxic positivity. I am not talking about shoving the sad things aside, just the opposite. If we think of ourselves as a screen and allow those emotions to come up and out of us, we can let things go much more quickly. The
mm-hmm.
negative things that happen to us, the anger that happened to us, because we understand it is here for our own learning, understanding, and healing. Does that make sense, Simona?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. And I want to know too. So we talk about this letting go piece, and I know each of these topics that we're talking about right now could be a full blown podcast episode in
I
and of
know.
itself. But I just like that, I don't know. I know my listener is going to gain so much from this conversation, so I'm okay with it. But when we
Okay.
talk about this piece of letting go, what
Yes.
are 3 actions that people can take to start that process of letting go?
So one is this beautiful analogy of being a screen. And what I mean, if I want everyone to hear what I'm saying, literally being a screen, like think of a screen on your window and think about a windstorm. And if wind blows through a screen, it's not going to blow the screen out, right? But what happens if you try to tape up the window and do the whole thing, right? And the energy and of the wind picks up so much that it could blow the whole window in, right? I mean, that's sort of what happens to us if we don't deal with our own emotions. It builds and we blow, right? And we all of a sudden freak out all over the place on our family or our friends or whatnot. When you think about yourself as a screen, it means that you allow, let's use anger. I think anger is something that we either tamp down or it builds up to a point where we have an explosion.
Yeah.
Think about anger. Say that you're in a conversation with your partner and you are so angry and you feel it and you just want to rage, and but you decide to bite your tongue. We always say that I bite my tongue and we tamp it down. And also, when we don't express our anger in healthy ways and we hold it in, it becomes resentment. And resentment can really become illness in the body.
Mm.
So if you think of yourself as a screen, you allow the anger to rise and come up through you, and you feel it, and you ask yourself, wow, this is very interesting. I'm feeling very angry. What is this feeling about?
Mm.
When have I felt this way before? Right? So you're raising your awareness just by holding the space of feeling the feeling. And you can say to your partner, I am feeling very angry right now, and I'm trying to understand what this is about. And this takes practice, by the
Oh yeah.
way. But the first thing would be to allow yourself to feel it. Okay. So that's the first thing. Be a screen. Allow yourself to feel it, allow it to rise and move through you rather than clamping onto it and staying in that negative energy of the anger where you carry it into your next day and you think about it and now it's ruining. We let it ruin the next day. It's not only
Yeah.
ruining this beautiful moment that I'm having, but we can hang on to that. I
Oh
know
yeah.
people that have grudges for years, right? So that's the first thing
It
is
makes you
allowing
sick
yourself.
too.
It makes
Like
you
it
very,
makes your body sick to do that, to
yes.
hang on to it like that.
Well, and I can tell you, right, the cancer in the body, any disease is always from it's emotional. It's things that come from our anyways. That's
Yep.
another
Nope.
story.
I
Okay.
get it. I get it. Number two.
Second thing, second thing you can do is start cultivating this relationship with your higher consciousness. How do you do that? As I said, you can meditate. You can, if you don't like that, take a walk, get present with what's happening around you. Another beautiful thing that that I do is writing. We call it automatic writing. Automatic writing is another beautiful way to have a dialogue. What do I mean by that? I mean, again, sitting in a quiet space, contemplate a question you might have for yourself. So, Simona, for you, when you were thinking about creating Costantini Productions, maybe you didn't know where to begin. And so you ask yourself, where do I begin? Right? We have spirit teams, we have our higher consciousness, and you sit and you write. What does that look like? I don't know what to write. You might say, well, you just start writing and you don't pick your pen up from your paper.
Mm.
And you can do a timed writing, maybe it's 20 minutes. And you can say, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And you can keep writing that. And
I've done that
eventually,
before.
yeah, it's very
I've
powerful.
it really is. And like honestly, like it might sound silly to like sit there and I literally put pen to paper and you just I think I wrote something like, I don't know what to write, but I'm really angry about it. And I don't like that I don't know what to write or whatever, whatever. And then it's like, but then and then no, 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 no. And then you go on and on and on and on. And then
Right.
eventually you get to the place where you're like, huh, okay.
It taps and like people will say, well, how do I know? Like it's just coming from me in my mind. Well, you're in collaboration. Of course, it is coming from you, but you'll know because you get surprised. You know, you get a surprise. You might write something and you're like, oh, that's surprising. Right. And this is when you know you're really starting to cultivate that, those little surprises that you get. And don't judge it. There is no right or wrong. You can't do it wrong. And I already can hear you guys. Oh, what if I do it wrong? Or it's not working. That is your ego. That is the judgment. Just enjoy it. This
Mm-hmm.
is why people who are deep into journaling get so much from it, right? Because they use it as a download. It's a very meditative process. If you don't like to write, put some music on, take a bath, you know, with your favorite beverage, whether it's a glass of wine or, a nice hot cup of tea. But, you know, there are so many different ways for you to cultivate that relationship that works for you. A third way is, depending on what's happening in your life, but through conversation, you know, through or by doing something joyful.
Mm.
Do you have something in your life that just brings you joy? I'll hear this all the time. People who love to read. I feel like if I sit down and read, I'm wasting my time. If something brings you joy, it is never a waste of time. I don't care if it's sitting there and you're playing video games. Does it bring you joy? When we are doing joyful things, we are raising our vibration, but we also have to judge the things that bring us joy.
Mm.
And I'm hoping people are hearing the word that I'm using over and over and over again. We judge ourselves all the time, from what we feel to what brings us joy. It's and we wonder why we walk around stressed out and angry all the time. you
It's
know
true. It's so true. It is so true. And most of us are not even aware of it. And then what happens is too, like you walk around so angry and you're so upset about something, and then your anger and upset bleeds into like the other person's, sort of life. And it doesn't mean that that can necessarily impact them, but sometimes it can. And then we just create more of this energy and this frequency around us. And then we kind of give permission for that feeling to come back over and over and over again. And like you said, it's not about that toxic positivity. It's not about, you know, if you
it's
need
just the
help and you need to
opposite.
lean on a friend and you need help through something, that is totally normal. But I think back to like myself before I even created this podcast, I was so judgmental of everybody around me. Okay. And like when you go around and you talk badly about people all the time, and that's the only thing you do, that is what you're creating in your awareness. That is what your life becomes. And that's not a pleasant way to live, right? And people don't want to be around people like that. So there's a difference between, in my opinion, someone who is struggling and needs help and we help them out, or someone who is choosing to spread just nasty energy around because they're so hurt and they're so unhealed, and they're aware, maybe they're not. But anyways, I digress. I just feel like it's just this continuous
No, this
loop,
is very
you know?
important. This is very important. It just reminded me of something else. So I
Mm.
do, you know me, I do everything I do is I'm fully committed to deep grief and loss work.
Yep.
And where I see anger, as you can imagine, people go through anger when they lose a loved one, and it's very important that they allow themselves to feel that anger. You see this a lot with very tragic, violent accidents like murder,
Mm.
right? And the anger and the rage that people hang on to. And the work that I do with people around this anger and rage is that the more anger and rage they have and they hang on to it, they are creating more of the energy that they don't want in the world, right?
Right.
Because it is rage and anger that killed their sibling, right? Or killed their partner or whatever. Murder is rage and anger. And so where we and I know it's counterintuitive. I have a right to be angry. Somebody took my brother's life. Yes, of course. And it is also your responsibility to own that energy, to
Mm.
take care of that energy, to heal that energy, so that now you are putting out what more of what you do want in the world, which is love.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that.
super powerful.
It's very powerful. Susan, I'm going to ask you my last question. And it's a question I've been asking on the podcast ever since I started the podcast. And it's, how can someone create a little more happiness in their day every day starting today?
Self-compassion, baby. Everything is
Mm.
about self-love. Self-love and compassion, by the way, it's great if you want to go get a manicure and a pedicure, but the very first thing that you can start doing to cultivate what I call true self-love is to stop judging yourself. And the way to do that is become aware of when you are. Listen to the
Mm.
language that you are using with yourself. What does your self-talk look like? So let's say I want to leave you with this. This is what it will sound like. You're feeling guilt about an emotion that you're having, and you say, I love you through the experience that you're having and the guilt that you're feeling. Start talking to yourself the way you would talk to a child or your baby,
Mm.
with love.
I love that. Susan,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. And
Thank
where
you for
can,
having
oh,
me.
you're welcome. Where can my listener find you so they can learn more about you?
So my podcast is Rock Your Shine. After you've been cracked wide open, and you can email me rockyourshine@gmail.com, and my website is rockyourshine.com.
Amazing. And all of your social media links will be linked below as well. Susan, this
Great.
was amazing. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. Be sure to connect with us and let us know what you loved from our conversation. And I hope you gained something super valuable here today that you can take and implement into your life. I hope you have a beautiful day today. And remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.